Ethan wakes up every night from nightmares about an old, eerie mansion. The problem? Every time he dreams about the place, something terrible happens in real life. Now, a series of strange events are linking his dreams to reality, and he needs to figure out what it all means before it's too late. If you're into mysteries and heart-pounding stories, keep watching. This one will grip you from start to finish.
Behind the doors.
Ethan woke with a start, his heart racing and skin covered in cold sweat. The nightmare still lingered in his mind like a persistent shadow. He sat up in bed, trying to recall the details of the mansion he had seen in his dream. It was an old structure, with broken windows, surrounded by twisted trees that seemed to whisper dark secrets. The air was heavy with an oppressive feeling, as if something sinister was about to happen. He shook his head, trying to dispel the image, but the sense that the place was familiar continued to bother him. He went downstairs and entered the kitchen, where the aroma of fresh coffee filled the air. His mother was at the stove, stirring a pot. "Good morning, Ethan," she said without turning around. "Did you sleep well?" "Not really," he replied, grabbing a mug and pouring himself some coffee. "I dreamed about that mansion again." She turned, her eyes filled with concern. "Still? You need to stop watching those horror movies before bed." "It's not the movies," he retorted, remembering the dread that the dream had instilled in him. "It's like the mansion is calling me." His mother's expression changed. "Ethan, dreaming of places like that can just be your imagination. There's nothing out there you need to worry about." Before he could respond, the phone rang, interrupting their conversation. His mother answered, and her expression shifted to one of worry. "What? How? I see, thank you." She hung up and looked at Ethan with a somber expression. "The neighbor was found dead this morning, apparently under mysterious circumstances." Ethan's stomach churned. He knew Mr. Thompson, an elderly man who always waved at him when he passed by. "What happened?" "I don't know all the details, but they said he was different. Some say it was an accident, others something stranger." Her tone was grave, and Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. The connection between his dream and reality seemed to be growing stronger every day. At school, the atmosphere was thick with whispers. His classmates murmured about the incident, and Ethan felt increasingly uneasy. When he ran into Sarah in the hallway, he decided to confide in her. "You won't believe what happened. The neighbor was found dead." "I heard," Sarah replied, her expression intrigued. "But that's not all. Have you heard the rumors about the mansion? They say it's haunted." He frowned, fear and curiosity mixing within him. "What do you know about it?" "Some say that whoever enters never comes out. Others talk about a family that disappeared without a trace." "I'm not sure, but there's something really wrong with that place," she said, glancing around as if afraid someone might overhear. Ethan felt a knot form in his stomach. The mansion, the dreams, and now the neighbor's death. It all seemed connected somehow. "We need to find out more about the story," he suggested, his mind racing with possibilities. "I agree," Sarah replied, her eyes shining with determination. "But we have to be careful. Whatever is happening, it seems dangerous." They moved to a quieter spot, speaking in hushed tones, and the atmosphere around them seemed charged with mystery. The idea of investigating the mansion intrigued him, but doubt and fear accompanied him as well. What else could be at stake? The connection between his dreams and the events in the town was becoming more real, and Ethan couldn't ignore the feeling that something dark was about to happen. With his thoughts in turmoil and a growing sense of foreboding, he realized that the mansion was not just an abandoned building. It was a gateway to a mystery that could change their lives forever. Ethan and Sarah entered the local library, an old building that exuded the smell of yellowed pages and accumulated dust. The dark wooden shelves stretched to the ceiling, filled with books that told stories of times past. The silence was broken only by the soft rustling of pages and the distant creak of a chair as a reader settled in. Ethan felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension, as if he was about to discover something that would change their lives forever. "Let's start here," said Sarah, pointing to the local history section. "Maybe we'll find something about the mansion." Ethan nodded, but a strange feeling began to form in his stomach. He had always felt that the mansion was more than just an abandoned building. There was an aura of mystery surrounding it. With a light touch on Sarah's arm, he led her to a more secluded corner of the library, where the lights were dimmer and the smell of mold was stronger. "Do you remember what the librarian said about the family that lived there?" Ethan asked as he pulled a thick book from the shelf. "They say they disappeared without a trace." "Yes, and that made me even more curious," replied Sarah, as she examined a worn leather-bound book. "Let's see if we can find any clues." As they flipped through the pages, Ethan couldn't help but notice how the atmosphere seemed to change around them. The air felt heavy, and the light that filtered through the windows seemed darker. He focused on the printed words, trying to absorb every detail. The book spoke of the old Aldridge family, who had amassed wealth through shady dealings. But what really caught Ethan's attention was the account of the last night they were seen. "I think I found something," exclaimed Sarah, her voice breaking the silence. "Look at this. It says that on the night of their disappearance, there was a violent storm, and neighbors heard screams coming from the mansion." Ethan frowned, his mind drifting back to his dreams, where storms were also a constant element. That's strange. What if the dreams are somehow connected to what happened there? Sarah looked at him with concern. "Ethan, we can't let this affect us. These are just old stories." "Stories that are becoming real," he murmured, the unease growing inside him. In the corner of the room, an elderly librarian with white hair and a piercing gaze watched the two with interest. He approached, his steps silent like those of a specter. "Can I help you?" His voice was soft, but there was a tone of warning. Ethan and Sarah exchanged glances. "We're researching the Aldridge mansion," Sarah said. "What can you tell us about it?" The old man frowned, his expression becoming more serious. "Ah, the mansion. Many avoid talking about it. They say it's cursed. Those who approach it often meet with misfortune." Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. "Misfortune? What do you mean?" "Disappearances, illnesses, tragic events, all linked to that family. I never knew if it was just superstition, but many in Hollow Grove believe the mansion holds a dark secret," he said, looking directly into Ethan's eyes. "But what happened to the family?" Sarah asked, eager for more information. The librarian hesitated before answering, as if weighing the significance of his words. "No one knows for sure. They were rich and powerful, but on that fateful night, all that was heard were screams. And from that day on, the mansion stood empty, and the Aldridges were declared missing." Ethan felt the ground shift beneath his feet. This can't be a coincidence," he said, his voice trembling. "I dream about the mansion and strange things happen in Hollow Grove." The old man raised an eyebrow as if he understood the true meaning behind Ethan's words. "Be careful, young man. Sometimes those who seek hidden truths end up attracting more than they bargained for." The phrase hung in the air, and Ethan felt a weight settle on his chest. He looked at Sarah, who also seemed affected by the librarian's words. What they were about to discover could be deeper and more disturbing than they had ever imagined. And with that, night was approaching, and with it, the shadow of the mansion seemed to stretch even further over their lives. Ethan woke to a new day, his mind still wrapped in the unsettling shadows that visited him every night. The sun filtered through the curtains, but its light could not dispel the cloud of apprehension hanging over him. He felt that something was brewing, a sinister connection between his dreams and the reality of Hollow Grove. Every dream he had about the mansion seemed to bring a wave of tragedies with it, as if he was becoming a catalyst for disaster. As he got ready for school, the image of the abandoned mansion kept invading his thoughts. He remembered the previous night, when he dreamed of the shadowy figure watching him, a specter that seemed to be waiting for something from him. With a deep sigh, Ethan decided he couldn't ignore this any longer. He needed answers. At school, the atmosphere was tense. Conversations in the hallways were filled with whispers about the neighbor found dead, and the tension was palpable. When he met Sarah during the break, she seemed as anxious as he was. "Ethan, you won't believe what my brother told me," Sarah said, pulling him into a quieter corner of the courtyard. He had a dream about the mansion too, something eerily similar to what you've been dreaming. He said he saw a light flickering in the mansion's window and then a scream. He was terrified. Ethan's heart raced. This can't be a coincidence. Every time I dream about that place, something bad happens. What are we going to do, Sarah? She frowned, her gaze drifting into the distance. We need to investigate. We can't just sit around waiting for more bad things to happen. Let's explore the mansion tomorrow morning. We can't let fear control us. Explore the mansion? Did you hear what the librarian said? Ethan hesitated, remembering the old man who had warned about the curse. He talked about misfortune, about people who went there and never came back. What if what he said is true? What if the mansion really has some connection to all of this? Sarah insisted, her determination evident. We need to know what's happening. We can't live with this fear and uncertainty. We'll go together, Ethan. He looked into her eyes and saw the courage he had always admired, a fire that burned within her, something that pulled him forward despite his reservations. Okay, he agreed. We'll go, but we need to be prepared for anything. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in his bed, anxiety coursing through his veins. The images of the mansion and the shadowy figure haunted him, and he felt that something was approaching, like a bad omen. When he finally managed to drift off, the nightmare returned in full force. In the darkness, the mansion loomed before him, its walls covered in dancing shadows. The figure was there, closer than ever. It was no longer just a specter. Now it seemed real and full of purpose. You are connected to us, Ethan, the voice whispered deep and dark. You cannot escape what is destined for you. He woke with a jolt, his heart pounding. With difficulty, he grabbed his phone and checked his messages. What he saw made his heart sink. A text from Sarah read, Ethan, my brother had another dream, and he's scared. He said the figure was looking at him. We need to talk. He looked out the window, the sky still dark, and felt that time was running out. He didn't know how, but he felt that the connection between his dreams and the mansion was tightening, and that the truth was about to be revealed. What is happening in Hollow Grove, Tom? He murmured, the question lost in the quiet of the night. Whatever was behind his dreams, he knew he needed to face it. Tomorrow would begin the search for answers, even if it meant confronting his own fears. The mansion was calling him, and he couldn't ignore its summons much longer. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting a pattern of dancing shadows on the ground as Ethan and Sarah approached the mansion. The air was thick with a mix of anticipation and fear, and the silence around them felt intense, as if nature itself was holding its breath. The mansion, with its weathered walls and broken windows, stood majestic and menacing before them. Are you sure we should do this? Sarah asked, hesitating at the entrance to the rusted gate. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, as if she feared something might hear. We have to, Sarah. We need to find out the truth. My dreams, they're not just dreams. They're a connection to all of this. Ethan replied, his voice firm, though there was a tremor that betrayed his fear. With a final nervous glance at each other, they crossed the threshold and entered the mansion's entrance hall. The smell of mold and rotting wood filled their nostrils. The place felt like a labyrinth of shadows, and each step they took echoed like a lament from the past. The walls were lined with dusty portraits that watched with empty eyes, and the silence was broken only by the sound of the wind blowing through broken windows. Let's go to the attic, Ethan suggested, remembering the diary they had found earlier. I think we can find more answers there. Sarah nodded, though a look of doubt remained on her face. They climbed the stairs, which creaked under the weight of their hopes and fears. When they reached the attic, a feeling of oppression enveloped them. The space was small, filled with dusty boxes and forgotten objects. A beam of moonlight illuminated a figure in the corner, and as they approached, they realized it was a dusty mirror. Ethan, look at this, Sarah called, pointing to the mirror. It looks different. It's just a mirror, Ethan said, but as he looked closer, the reflected image began to distort. He saw a shadow forming behind him. Sarah, behind me. The shadowy figure appeared, and Ethan felt an icy chill run down his spine. It was the same figure from his nightmares, but now, in the moonlight, its form became clearer. It was a young woman with deep, sad eyes with long, disheveled hair, who seemed to be pleading for help. "You shouldn't be here," the figure said, her voice echoing off the attic walls. "You don't understand what you're doing." "Who are you?" Ethan asked, his voice thick with a mix of fear and curiosity. "I am the daughter of the family who lived here," she replied. "I am the reason you are trapped in this cycle." Ethan's dreams are not just visions, they are a call. You are the last descendant of the family, and you need to understand that your connection to this house is deeper than you realize. Ethan's heart raced. "What do you mean by that?" "The nightmares are the manifestation of your inner struggle," the figure continued. "You must sacrifice your connection to the mansion to break the curse that binds it to this cycle of tragedy." "Sacrifice? What does that mean?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "It means confronting the truth about who you are, Ethan. You and I are the same person, in different times. To free Hollow Grove, you must free yourself from your own identity tied to this house." Ethan felt his world collapse. "How can I do that? What do I need to do?" The figure looked at him with a mix of sadness and hope. "You must face your fears. Accept that part of you was shaped by this house, but it doesn't have to be that way forever. The choice is yours." As her words echoed in his mind, Ethan realized that the decision he had to make was not just about Hollow Grove, but about who he really was. He turned to Sarah, who looked at him with concern. "I don't know if I can do this," Ethan said, his voice low. "If you don't try, we'll lose everything," Sarah replied, her determination lighting up the gloomy environment. "You're stronger than you think, Ethan." With a deep sigh, Ethan looked back at the figure. "I'm ready. What should I do?" The figure smiled sadly and with a gesture indicated the mirror. "Enter. Face your truth. It's the only path to freedom." Ethan hesitated, but Sarah's determination encouraged him. He approached the mirror, feeling the pulsing energy emanating from it. As he touched the cold surface, a wave of light enveloped him, and the mansion's darkness began to dissipate. He was about to face his own essence, and with it, free Hollow Grove from the curse that had haunted his life and those he loved.